for your F.Y.D? Find out what I mean on this episode of Pushback.
Go, Jonny, go, go. Go, Jonny, go, go. Go, Jonny, go, go.
If you're concerned about the direction our culture is heading, then maybe it's time to push back.
Hello, my dear listeners. This is Pushback, and this is Dr. Jonny again, coming to you with pretty relevant information again this month. I want to apologize for sort of the sporadic nature of my podcast rolling out this month. I assure you it's not because of laziness or disinterest. It's because of life pulling me in a few different directions. And so it's sometimes difficult to find time to do the things that are scheduled when some things that are unscheduled happen in our lives. So all is good, but I'm coming to you again this week with some, I believe, relevant information. And really the key word is the word information. A lot of times people say, I'm giving this to you, FYI. For your information. So this is something that you can process, or some things that you can do. But what happens when it's F.Y.D? For your disinformation? Then we run into some problems. We've discussed this on previous podcasts as well, the importance of the kingdom of God, his people, his children to be informed. We are to be wise. We're supposed to operate in wisdom with a sound mind. And sometimes the only way we can do that is to look for the information on our own, to connect with those, hopefully I am one of those, reliable sources of information with nothing to sell, just the heart of improving our culture. When we can connect to those places, then we can make informed decisions. We can look and do the right things for our families. And we've had many opportunities over these 6 years of doing this podcast to discuss various things that are good for us, that are not good for us, the things that we can connect to, the things that we have to be super careful about as being his children, as being representatives of his quote-unquote truth here on this earth. We have to be careful about where we're getting our information. We have learned, and the statistics are showing, that the distrust of the media today is at an all-time low. And there's a good reason for that, because there's been so much, quote, disinformation, end quote, that has been coming our way. And it requires us to be proactive and to sift through some of the garbage, some of the rhetoric, some of the secondary gain that's getting to us through this information. And so we have to be informed. It doesn't mean we're not led by the Spirit. It doesn't mean that his wisdom and his Spirit isn't the most important thing. But we are immersed in this world, and we carry a responsibility to bring and to release truth here on this earth. And so I will do my part to research some of these things on your behalf and to try to present those to you in a sane, logical, reasonable, and spiritual way. That's my goal. That's my challenge, isn't it? With this podcast for 6 years. I won't say that I've always done it perfectly, but I do the best that I can to bring information to you. Well, 3 things have popped up interestingly since I was here with you at the last podcast. That has been F.Y.D. And I believe it's been presented to us for our disinformation. And they have been dominating some of the headlines this week. And so there's been 3 of them altogether. And so I want to recap those for you. Because I believe that they all carry the theme of disinformation. And we have to be very careful about how we approach those. The first is, I'm very sobered to tell you that the United States has surpassed a milestone in reported measles cases, with 2025 now having the most cases since the disease was declared eliminated in the United States in 2000. That was 25 years ago. It was eradicated. It was gone. It was eliminated. And the most cases in more than 3 decades are being reported in 2025. Just since 2024, there's been a 29-fold increase in the cases of measles. There's been a hotbed down in Texas, but of course, just like most things do, they are beginning to spread to other major city centers. There have been, unfortunately, 3 directly related United States deaths connected to a measles outbreak. And in the Americas, there's been 13 deaths as they're all increasing. We're only to the beginning of August. The reports that I'm getting are from early to mid-July. So I'm guessing that these numbers are even greater. I want to read, it says, in addition to case counts, the dashboard that I'm getting this from, the public health dashboard, provides data on measles cases by age and by vaccination status. Unsurprisingly, nearly all 2025 cases have occurred to those who are unvaccinated or whose vaccination status is unknown. Cases have been reported across a wide range, indicating that this outbreak was years in the making due to long-standing gap in measles vaccine coverage. The ongoing outbreak we are seeing in the United States underscores the importance of maintaining adequate levels of measles vaccinations, says IVAC Executive Director William Moss, who co-leads the Measles Tracking Project. The U.S. is at risk of losing its measles elimination status should cases continue at this rate. As vaccine confidence continues to be undermined, immunization is more important than ever to end this outbreak and prevent future outbreaks from occurring. I've done multiple series on the facts about the vax, especially obviously when we went through the COVID vaccination. I tried to give you the best data that I could going forward, and I appreciate all of those who listened to me, adhered to my advice, and even those that didn't, I appreciated you listening and giving feedback. But it's super important that we are informed that vaccination is the reason why measles was eradicated off the United States. Unvaccination, decreased vaccination, and disinformation about vaccinations are the reason that measles are coming back. It's a simple equation, and there is no doubt about it. I am very sober to say even things like polio and some of these things that were just simply eliminated off the spectrum, even when I was training in medicine, are now starting to return. And it is unsurprising based on the pushback, based on the reluctance of those getting their children vaccinated. And I believe with all my heart, and I've given the cases, you can go back to my previous podcast, that this is because of disinformation. Vaccines are tried and they're true and they are safe and they are protective against diseases that kill you. And so these aren't benign cases. These aren't benign issues. These are attacks on the human body and they have severe consequences. Now, there are thousands of those who have contracted measles. Only 13 of those have died. But what about those 13 and who is taking the accountability for those 13? If we are going to have an anti-vaccination stance, then you also need to be held responsible for those who succumb to the effects of the disease when they are unvaccinated. There needs to be a responsibility for those things. And I'm calling for that. I'm calling for that responsibility to people to stand up and say, well, maybe we were wrong, and maybe vaccination is the safest thing to do for our children because it actually protects them from a disease that is going to now be more widespread across our country again, and we're going to have to deal with the effects, and not only the death, but the morbidity that also comes with the effects of measles. It's not a benign disease. And so I know the pushback is there's a lot of diseases we're over-vaccinating. There's just too many of them. Chickenpox is no big deal. My friends, chickenpox, the varicella virus is a problem, and it affects many people in a very adverse way. And we can eliminate that by vaccination. And you can say, well, I know vaccination during COVID people were still getting COVID despite being vaccinated. And that is true, and I cannot refute that. That is absolutely true, maybe higher than even anticipated. But my friends, when we were addressing the issue of ICU, ventilator, and death, it was unequivocally true that those who were vaccinated had greater protection than those that weren't. And there was a point in the COVID crisis when it was a pandemic of the unvaccinated. And I have little to zero doubt in my mind that when we are now on the other end of this COVID crisis, it's because of the vaccination levels. Absolutely 100%. And so you ask yourself, well, what is the greater evil? What is the damage of the vaccine? Well, the damage of the vaccine has not been established. It does not cause autism. It does not cause major complications. There was a list of problems that I went through in regards to people making claims about the COVID vaccine, and I'm happy to report none of them have really come true. Fertility rates were supposed to drop, didn't happen. There were supposed to be tracking devices in those. They're not there. There's supposed to be long-term effects on blood levels. That has not happened. None of those things were true. They were just the sky is falling announcements by people that were unsubstantiated. And the disinformation that was rolled out has actually put people in danger. And there is always a political motivation, and we have to always be careful between what is good, what is right for us, what is healthy for us, and what is a political spirit. At the core of the political spirit is control. And we always have to be mindful. And people have been very concerned about forced vaccination as being this measure of control. And I have agreed with that since day one, and nobody can refute that. I have been against forced vaccination from the beginning. But I have been very, very for informed vaccination. And I will continue to ring that bell. And now this is another warning sign. The return of measles is the return of polio. This is another warning sign that vaccination is the answer. And it's safe, and it's effective, and it will continue to be. And I highly recommend it for you and for your family. Please do your research on your own, but don't listen to the disinformation. We have a politically appointed RFK Jr. who is the head of the Department of Health and Human Services, and he, is going to make America healthy again. And I applaud a lot of the things that he is doing, including examining the food that we eat and getting it to levels, encouraging exercise, encouraging fitness. He is doing a wonderful job in that respect. But he is also an anti-vaccinator, and that has serious and dangerous consequences. And so we need to listen to what he says, but hopefully he will also listen to the science as well, because there is a difference sometimes between politics and science. There's no difference between God and science. I will continue to fight that. God is science. He created science. But politics and science, there can be an agenda there. And the man who is leading that department, the Department of Health, is an anti-vaccinator, and that is a very big concern to me. And unsurprisingly, we might see a shift in other things, and he's responsible for that. If he's at the wheel and he's making statements, then he needs to be held accountable even for the deaths that take place. I know that's a hard thing to say, but there are consequences to yielding disinformation. It doesn't mean that he's always wrong. He just needs to prove it. He needs to scientifically prove it. I can scientifically prove to you that vaccines are safe and effective. And I encourage you to do the research on their own. Number 2, let me reference an article that says, "There goes Antarctica." It's a great article, and what they're saying is that Antarctica isn't disappearing or melting. It's just being also removed from the explanation of climate change, because our southernmost continent, we've been told, this is by the I&I editorial board, released back in the middle of May. The suffocating canary in the global coal mine, the more ice loss in Antarctica, the greater trouble we're in, is what we've been told. So what do we make of a study which found that between 2021 and 2023, there was a record-breaking increase in the Antarctic ice sheet? Same is true about the Arctic Circle, by the way. The ice caps are not melting, they're actually increasing. And we mark it down as another in a long line of misses from the global warming zealots. Notably, 4 major glaciers in the Wilkes Land, Queen Mary Land region of East Antarctica reversed their previous pattern from 2011 to 2020 and instead showed significant mass gain during just the 2-year 2021 to 2023 period. How could such an unanticipated event happen? Well, if you go online and you begin to look and study and research, there is a lot of backpedaling and there's a lot of trying to explain this away. One person says the study points to an anomalous precipitation as the primary driver, suggesting that natural variability plays a significant role in short-term ice sheet changes. And it underscores the complexity of Antarctica's ice system and the pitfalls of oversimplified climate narratives. The article writer writes, on the latter, we've had enough of oversimplified climate narratives. They give a short list of many missed climate predictions, or you might say disinformation. They say it with such authority and with such knowing, and it turns out they were wrong. Now, there's nothing wrong with being wrong. As long as you own it, as long as you come back and say, well, maybe vaccines are effective for measles and we shouldn't take the risk. And that's a safe alternative. Or maybe you can say, I guess we were wrong about the ice caps and there seems to be some variability there that is quote unquote normal. Some very smart people, they said that snowfalls are now just a thing of the past. Major European cities will be sunk beneath the rising seas as Britain is plunged into a Siberian climate by 2020. Glaciers were thought to be gone from Glacier National Park by 2020, but they're still there. No glaciers on Mount Kilimanjaro either. They were supposed to have vanished by 2020, but they're still there. The insufferable John Kerry declared at various times, we have fewer than 100 months, or 12 years, or 10 years, or 4 years, or 500 days to save the earth from man's fossil fuel use. AOC, New York Democratic representative, said in 2019 that Miami will not exist in a few years due to the effects of global warming. She also suggested the world is going to end in 12 years if we don't address climate change. Then California Governor Jerry Brown was so sure that global warming was near that he said, in less than 5 years, even the worst skeptics will be believers. Absolutely nothing has happened since that would convince the skeptic to become one of the faithful. And then there's Al Gore. You know, it's okay for Al Gore to care about the environment. It's okay for him to be concerned about fossil fuels. It's okay for him to have an environmental bent. But it's also okay for him to admit that he was wrong. And he said that the ice caps would be gone by 2015. 35 years ago, the Washington Post was sure that CO2 was the gas most responsible for predictions that the Earth will warm and will force temperatures up by the average of 3 degrees Fahrenheit by the year 2020. And that hasn't happened. And it could go up to 6 degrees Fahrenheit. And finally, there was a 1997 prediction that global warming would kill 8 million people by 2020. That was in no way related to any gashouse gas or emissions. But there was several deaths due to a virus. They go on to write, climate science has been hijacked and weaponized. The media breathlessly report with no evidence but plenty of speculation that man is killing his planet with carbon dioxide emissions, and politicians promise impending doom. In their big spending, liberty-violating legislation isn't passed, celebrities bully the common people and elevate their status while doing the things they tell the rest of us we can't do. Activist researchers produce bias, agenda-based, and corrupted work, and witless fanatics block productive citizens from getting to their jobs, hold up traffic, deface art, and vandalize public property. The behavior of all the above is lousy and worse, and we will continue to point it out, as well as the present facts that debunk the nonsense we see every day. It is our duty to bring as much clarity to the muddled global warming tale as we are possibly able. Now, I've said before, I am an environmentalist. I love this earth, and it is our responsibility as ambassadors of this earth to care for it and to monitor it. But information is tricky, and we can't just yell the sky is falling without any evidence or proof that it is actually happening, and that it is not due to normal variations that we would see actually post-flood, that we would actually see post-ice age. We would expect the earth to actually gradually warm over time. That's actually normal, and we would expect to see that. And we should watch what we're doing about polluting our environment. But to connect the two haphazardly and recklessly is disinformation, and we need to be wiser. Number 3, maybe the most interesting of all 3 that has come up in this last week, and that's what we'll call the Russiagate scandal. It is centered on disinformation. There was a Steele dossier that was written right around the 2016 election, claiming Russian interference in the 2016 election and tipping the scales to Trump. Turns out, this dossier was made up and actually financed by the Clinton campaign. Now more information has come out this week that not only was it completely made up and there were shenanigans going on in regards to the election and going into the Trump administration blocking what he was doing, but once the Obama administration was wise to the fact that there was no evidence of collusion, he ordered the CIA, FBI, Department of Justice to continue to support the narrative. See, my friends, it's disinformation, and we are inundated with it, and we are, if we're honest, influenced by it. Now, let me be clear. Politicians do underhanded things. I'm not condoning it. I think that this whole thing is scandalous. It's the right word. But it's not new. Let's be real. Since politics has ever been invented, there's been unscrupulous, underhanded things that have been done. And we'll see what happens with this in regards to criminal charges and obstruction of justice and perjury and intent to sway an election. This is treasonous type talk. This is a big deal. And this could turn out to be a Watergate level scandal. So we'll see what happens. But the real breach, the real thing that we need to be concerned about is how the press refused to do their job and to actually investigate the information. They simply regurgitated what they were told to us, and we were given information that was completely and utterly false. And not only false, but the narrative was continued and discussed as if the consequences of this was threatening our democracy. Do you remember those conversations? Turns out it was made up. And it doesn't mean that the Trump administration isn't able to do things that are unscrupulous. But you can't make it up. And you would think that we would have a press. You'd think that we would have the people that their jobs are to report to us the information. You'd think that they would have our back and they would look into it and they would say that this is alleged or supposed or we don't know yet, but that is not what happened. And even as the information is coming out, some people are still doubling down on the narrative that this is possibly true. Well, information is being released, true information. And it can be spun a lot of different ways by a lot of different people. And it's going to be our job over the next couple of weeks to sort all of that out, because it's going to be spun in ways that are going to try to prevent people from being embarrassed, criticized, or politically damaged. So let's lean into the story and find out what is true and find out what is real. If we get firsthand information, try to get and read transcripts, the things that they are actually saying and doing, so that we can understand exactly what happened. I think it's important. You might say, well, I'm not interested in all that politics, garbage, and corruption. But we have to know what is true. And it's also very important, and I exhort you to not perpetuate information that we are unsure of. Until we get the full story, we need to be those that offer information from the standpoint that this is not completely known yet. And that we make sure that we don't disparage other people or say things or bear false witness about our fellow man. It's about information. And my friends, as hard as it is to hear, it's going to require a little digging, require a little work on our part until it settles into our heart what is true and what is not true. Great headlines this week, but all about leaning into the truth of what is propagated to us. It's our duty as ambassadors of heaven to analyze and with a sound mind present the facts to our people. I believe that we can do that. I think it's exciting, and hopefully my podcast plays a little bit of a role in that. Hey, my friends, we're only about 1 month away from the release of Famology, a podcast that's going to be released by myself and by my wife, where we answer your questions about family, marriage, and parenting. Please check it out and tune in and spread the word. We want to roll this out with a lot of momentum, and we are so anxious to hear your questions and your concerns because you're real people. And we're not afraid of your questions. The specific, the detailed, the vague, the funny, whatever the question is, we're going to try to tackle it the best that we can and give you insight from our experience as ministers, as family members, as physicians, and also from our experience as representatives of heaven. So let's work together to make our families the strongest they can be, because as family goes, so goes the culture. That's always true. So check it out, Famology Podcast, in 1 month. Until I see you again next week, let's go together now to set and shape the culture.